Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei met Ravel early and fall in love with her part 3. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Though support the LIONHEART021 the Snow Wolf for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in description. Let's start this video. The sun illuminated the morning streets of Kuo beautifully as many teenagers and young children made their way to school. Some could be seen chatting excitedly with their friends, others were on their smartphones discussing the latest trends and movies. One lone teenager was calmly making his way through the streets towards Kao Academy. He was dressed in the regular uniform with the exception of his shirt being long-sleeved but were rolled up to his elbows that showed of his toned and defined arms and torso. He was also the only guy wearing earrings, along with his green eyes and braids in his shaggy hair, made many young girls blush and giggle excitedly at the mysterious student. Ice just kept walking calmly, carrying his bag over his shoulder, seeming to casually ignore everything around him when in fact his senses were sharp and his hockey honed to perfection. His training taught him to always be aware of his surroundings and be ready for an attack on his person. It was also amusing to him that nobody recognized him and that the same girls who used to sneer at him for being a pervert are now fangirling over him. Outwardly he kept a stoic expression. Inwardly, he was laughing his ass off. A few months ago, he would have been jumping for joy at receiving such attention from these girls. Now though, he couldn't care less. Maybe it was his increase in power, his newfound confidence, or maybe his dragonification, but he felt that they were beneath him. They were hypocrites and were undeserving of his notice. Therefore, he didn't register any of them as he continued his trek. As he walked on, he thought back to the aftermath of his raiding game victory. Flashback. The atmosphere was celebratory in the infirmary, housing the remaining members of the Grimoire peerage as they celebrated their victory in a grueling and hard-fought raiding game. Although they have a previous victory under their belt against Sona Citri, it couldn't really count as a satisfying win. This one though gave them all a feeling of pride and accomplishment, defeating the strongest youth devil to put them on the radar of many people. They were joined by their king Riaz, Asia, Irina and Ravel. Riaz was in tears as she congratulated and thanked her servants for fighting so hard on her behalf. Has anyone seen Ice? Questioned Zenobia with a tilt of her head. Her question elicited many emotions from the occupants of the room, mostly positive. They were all waiting with bated breath to see their friend again. He made a stop at the other infirmary. He should be here in a few minutes. Came the answer from Azazel as he stepped into the room, followed by Surzich's, Grafia and little Milikas. Riaz won Isama. Congratulations on winning. Cheered Milikas with an adorable smile on his face that made many of the girls coo at his cuteness. Ria-tan. Ani-chan is so proud of you. Exclaimed Surzich with manly tears running down his face as he made to glump his sister before the ever-reliable Grafia intercepted him by way of a hand to his ears, followed by a painful twist. Surzich's Sama, you are the Mao Lucifer. Please show proper decorum. Stated Grafia with a long-suffering sigh accompanied by the shrieks of pain from Surzich's, which made the members of the Orc chuckle uncomfortably. Seems like you guys are having fun in here. Came a cool voice from the door. As they looked towards it, the star of today's show stepped into the room, accompanied by the atomic blushes of the females of the room, including Grafia, although she had more control of herself. He still had the same pants and boots from earlier, but now swapped out the combat vest for a white button-up shirt with the top button undone, giving them a glimpse of a delicious neckline adorned by his dragon fang necklace. Over the shirt he wore a black leather jacket that extended to his knees with whitish-gray fur along the collar, Squall Leonhardt's jacket from Final Fantasy VE, except it extends to the knees. All in all, he exuded the aura of a cool bad boy. Riaz immediately sobs uncontrollably up as all the emotion she's been bottling up these last few months all came rushing back to her as she barrels towards him in a hug. As she cries into his chest, apologizing for what happened and asking for his forgiveness, Isis just gives a wry smile and pats her uncomfortably on the shoulder, telling her that everything's okay and that he doesn't hold a grudge. Relief immediately filled the orc as he said those words. They thought things could finally go back to normal. That is until they noticed that Ice wasn't drooling over Riaz like he usually does, or making any inappropriate remarks about Op-I. If anything, he looked totally impassive in her presence. This worried them as they realized that things aren't just going to fix themselves. And the guy who usually fixes things doesn't look like he wants to. After Riaz disengaged him and make herself look presentable, Ice turned toward the other occupants of the room. Surzich's, Grafia-san and of course little Milikas, good to see you again. Greeted Ice politely toward Surzich's and Grafia before patting Milika's head, making the little boy go into a temporary state of bliss. The former smiled widely as he put his arm around Ice's shoulder, while his wife politely greeted Ice back. Good evening, Ice-sama. Congratulations on a magnificently fraught battle. Praised Grafia stoically as Ice blushed lightly at the praise from someone he holds in high regard. Thanks Graphius and that means a lot coming from you. He said. Seriously Ice-kun, that fight was one for the ages, not to mention your little speech in the middle of it. Do you have any idea what kind of stir it caused among the higher-ups? Questioned Surziches. Stir? I don't know what you mean, I just spoke my mind like I always do. I thought people were used to that part of me. Asked Ice with a sly smile on his face and his eyes shining with mischief that made Azazel and Surziches burst out laughing. It's safe to say that your little training retreat paid dividends. Stated Azazel. Yeah, I really did. I feel better than I ever have in my life. Plus I learned a whole lot about the supernatural world as well. The boosted gear really is a well of information if you know where to look. Replied Ice with a subtle wink to Azazel, who caught on quickly to his meaning. Ice Nai-sama, you were so cool out there. Praised Milikas with stars shining in his eyes as he gazed at Ice with adoration, making Surziches crouch in the corner with a storm cloud over his head as he drew shapes into the ground with his finger, saying how Ice was stealing his son away, making everyone in the room sweat drop, while Graphia's eyebrow was twitching irritably. Ice just ignored the drama and picked up little Milikas and put him on his shoulder, regaling him tales of his awesome victories, making the little boy gush in excitement and the girls in the room coo at the adorable scene. Graphia just smiled softly, seeing two of her favorite boys get along. She would never say it out loud, but she had a bit of a soft spot for Ice. He was like a goofy little brother that you couldn't help but love. You cut it pretty close today. You're normally pretty punctual, so why were you late? Questioned Azazel curiously. Ice just sheepishly scratched his head as he responded. Yeah, well, during the time I was training I erected a powerful barrier spell to contain any damage I caused, which I released a few hours before the match. But as soon as I released it I found someone waiting for me on the other side. Spoke Ice. Well, he didn't lie, he didn't tell them the entire truth either. They didn't need to know about the time dilation field for now. The others were a bit surprised that he was able to use barrier magic, as it wasn't something common. Their surprise suddenly turned to alarm at the prospect of someone lying in wait for Ice. Was it the Cows Brigade? Questioned Surziches sharply. His earlier good mood vanished as he was in full leader mode. Ice just shook his head negatively. No, I doubt it. If anything, it was the old Mag faction. I took care of the problem though, so there's no need to worry. Assured Ice cryptically. The adults in the room could sense that he didn't give them the entire story, but when he signaled them with his eyes, they knew they would get it later in a more private location. Once the worry passed, things went back to normal with boisterous conversation from Surziches and Azazel. Ice went over to Gasper and praised him for his bravery, making the damper sob in happiness at his senpai's praise. The others got a word or two of congratulations. They did notice thought that it seemed a little impersonal compared to the usual compliments of Ice. It made them a little sad on the inside to see this change. It felt as though a gap opened up between them and Ice. They could only hope to mend their fractured relationship in the coming days. As the festivities continued, Ice walked over to his manager, who sat at the corner of the room. Her face lit up in joy at seeing his, which she quickly tried to mask with a facade of indifference. Ice just chuckled at the tsundere tendencies of his beautiful blonde manager. Hey Ravel, good work today, no only in the stands, but for organizing everything just as I asked. In fact, it turned out better than I imagined thanks to your dedication. I'm proud to call you my manager. Commended Ice with a warm and kind smile on his face as he patted the head of Ravel, whose face ignited in an atomic blush, along with the most blissfully happy expression on her face at the praise from the man she loved. It was like her greatest dreams had come true. There were even tears at the corner of her eyes as she basked in the presence and adoration of her beloved. Anything for you, Ice-sama. Stated Ravel, who was still lost in the sensation of the praise and head patting from Ice, who just chuckled wryly at the somewhat childish behavior from the resident Oju-sama. There were those who didn't look happy at all at this interaction though. Riaz, Akeno, Asia, Zenyov, Irina and Kaneko were wearing expressions of extreme jealousy at the interaction between the two of them. Ice was so formal and indifferent when dealing with them on his return, but with Ravel he was so warm and friendly. Like the old Ice was with them. They felt a pang of sadness in their hearts at this. Was this the consequence of their actions and their selfish behavior? They didn't like it at all. They needed to get to work on fixing their relationship with him as soon as possible. Flashback end. That was Friday afternoon. It was now Monday morning, and those girls have been pestering him about his training and trying to get reactions from him by dressing skimpily around the house. It was honestly getting on his nerves a little. He did appreciate the view of their barely clothed bodies, but their constant attempts to make things up to him was wearing his ridiculously long patience thin. Luckily he used his disciple to keep himself from reacting outwardly to their provocation, much to their disappointment. He finally made his way into his classroom and took his regular seat just as the class was about to get started, drawing the attention of everyone, their teacher included. Excuse me, young man, I don't think I was informed of a new transfer student. Are you perhaps in the wrong class? Questioned the teacher politely. Ice just sighed irritably, knowing what a headache was about to come. I'm not in the wrong class, Ms. Hanakawa. I only took a 2-month break, but I didn't think you'd forget me so easily. It me Haidu Issei. Stated Ice impassively, causing many spit takes and jaw drops as the rest of the class looked at him in unmitigated shock and disbelief. What? Was the general consensus. How do? The pervert. What the hell happened to him? When did he get so hot? Ice, you traitor. These were the predictable reactions of his classmates. He paid them no heed as he focused on the young teacher who was blushing as he gazed at him. He decided to turn on the charm as he looked at her and smiled politely, causing her, as well as the female population of the class, to blush even more, and many of the guys stare daggers at him. Would you like me to get a note from the student council to confirm my identity, Ms. Hanakawa? Questioned Ice, benevolently turning the teacher into a stuttering mess as she shook her head negatively, taking a moment to collect herself before continuing the class. The level of killing intent directed at his was somewhat impressive, he had to admit. He just ignored them though and focused on the class. Even though his tutors made sure he was educated in the basics of life including maths, science, history, which most of them lived, and politics, he still decided to try and be a good student if nothing else than to make his parents happy after the years of disappointment he caused them. Scene change as he packed his books away and then took out his bento, he sensed a perceived danger and subtly shifted his body a few degrees to the side and angled himself in such a way the punches missed him completely, causing the offending parties to fall flat of their faces from overextending themselves. He just shook his head at them. They never learned. Ice. You bastard. How dare you betray us like this? We were partners and now you come in here with your bishounen looks, stealing all the female attention. At least send some our way. Demanded Motohama as Mitsuda just nodded along next to him. Ice fought the urge to facepalm at these two. Is this really what he was like? A wave of embarrassment overcame him at that thought, with a certain red dragon laughing at him in his head. What on earth are you talking about? I can't help the way I look, and I don't really care what these little girls think of me, so you don't have to feel threatened about me taking them. I have actual taste, thank you very much. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to have my lunch. Stated Ice with half-lidded eyes, pissing the two off even further and making the girls swoon at his cold and cutting comments. Saying it made him even more attractive. He just sweat dropped at being surrounded by these idiots. He grabbed his bento before hurrying out of the class as elegantly as he could. Scene change. Currently we find Ice chilling out on the couch in the student council room, eating his bento. He ran into his friend Saji from the Citri peerage, who invited him back to the student council room to hang out. But man, Haidu, what the hell have you been doing to end up like this? I watched a match with Bale, and you totally dominated it. Seriously, what the fuck have you been eating? Screamed Saji hysterically as he grabbed Ice by the collar and started shaking him. Ice just looked back at his friend with a deadpan stare. I haven't been eating anything different. I've just been training really hard, plus what can I say, puberty was kind to me. Stated Ice with a playfully mocking smirk on his face as Saji just broke down in tears at the unfairness of the world. He recovered quickly though. By the way, congratulations on being selected for the mid-class promotion trials. Said Saji with a clap to the back. Ice just smiled in thanks as he thought back to that day. Flashback, mid-class promotion trials. Sounds about right. Stated Ice. He was currently situated in the large conference room of the Haidu residence, which was currently occupied by the Orc, Irina, Azazel, Surziches and Grafia. The current Mao Lucifer stopped by to inform them of the recommendation for promotion for 3 of the members of the peerage, namely Ice, Akeno and Yudo. Riaz, of course, was bursting at the seams with pride for her cute servants and their achievements before even making their official rating game debut. It was a huge accomplishment for her peerage. Akeno and Yudo were quite pleased as well as they acknowledged the praise from their fellow club members, while Ice just looked like he expected it. Ice knew this was coming as his defeat of Saraerd Bale compounded all his other achievements, together giving the higher-ups no choice but to promote him. He also knew that his little dig at the council played a big role in it, as well as garnering the overwhelming support of the commoner devils to his cause. The political pressure facing them was probably too much to deny him any longer. Normally, he would have been promoted straight to being a high-class devil, but this is probably just another way for those old farts to flex whatever minuscule power they have left. Ice isn't too worried about it, as with the state of the world at the moment, it won't be long before he has another achievement to add to his collection that will force them once again to promote him. The 3 of them thanked Surziches for the opportunity and accepted the promotion as the conversation continued. So like that, next week the 3 of you, Ice, Kiba and Akeno, will participate in the middle-class devil promotion test at the underworld. Stated Surziches, causing some murmurs for the abrupt date of the test, while Ice just raised an eyebrow. Again, thanks to his training, he could read between the lines of this one as probably being another attempt from the higher-ups to stifle him by giving him little time to prepare for the test. He just smirked to himself, thinking of those idiots and their petty attempts. His tutors prepared him for this test and the one to follow months ago. He didn't have a single thing to worry about. Surziches continued to inform them of the format of the test, which was surprisingly similar to the one in the human world, which consisted of a report, an essay and application questions. Luckily, according to Surziches, the recommendation is permanent, so even if the test is failed, you can take it at another opportunity. As the discussion was coming to a close, Roswies stood up. "Now, since the discussion is basically finished, I will take my leave," she said. "You going somewhere, Roswies?" questioned Ice. He didn't really have a problem in interacting with Roswies. She wasn't part of the argument 2 months ago, plus she was always pretty outspoken with him. She wasn't afraid to call him out for his perverted tendencies, and she was also a good friend to talk to, so they had a pretty friendly relationship with each other. "To Northern Europe. I'm thinking of returning home for a while," she answered. Ice just raised an eyebrow at her as a universal sign to continue as she blushed lightly at his detached expression. She coughed lightly into her fist to regain her composure before answering. "Currently, I think I'm lacking power. There are many occasions where the Gremory team fights strong opponents. At this rate, I will become a hindrance. I'm thinking about increasing the trade of rook," stated Roswies bashfully. Ice just nodded his head in understanding. He did the same thing a few months ago after all. "I see. Well, good luck, Roswies, but considering it's you, I'm sure you'll do great," stated Ice with a charming smile, causing the Valkyrie to blush prettily. She couldn't help it. He looked so much more handsome now, coupled with his power, maturity and his cool disposition, made him a very attractive for the virgin Valkyrie, not that she would say that out loud. She didn't have the most confidence in these areas. "Roswies, is there something you can rely on in Valhalla?" asked Azazel. "Yes, there is a senpai of mine who is a professional in that department. It seems like getting points at magical attacks during the Valkyrie candidate test has been a vain," answered Roswies. Ice just nodded his head. He already had great respect for Roswies. She was extremely talented at magic, only being 2 years older than him, and is hailed as a prodigy. But she still remained a kind and humble person at heart, which he found very endearing. She was also a fearsome warrior on the battlefield, and the dragon part of him was drawn to that. Looking at the balance of Ria's team, it would be good to have someone who uses magic. It might have been good to use bishop or pawn to increase her strong points. Ria's team has overwhelming firepower, but looking at as a whole, it has shallow defense and can easily be taken down by tricks and techniques. Even though Akeno and Gasper are talented in different branches of magic, and Ice showed quite the mastery of fire magic in the last game. In the past games and actual battles, the opponents aimed for those. In other words, the whole team has muscles even in their brains. Something like defeat them before getting defeated. Covering those parts with magic would be a good thing. Azazel pointed out amusedly, causing bitter smiles on the faces of the Gremory peerage and Rias to be blushing in embarrassment, while Ice just chuckled good-naturedly, knowing that he had a hell of a lot more tricks up his sleeve that he has yet to show. But there are many fans that prefer teams like your group. Strategy-type teams and technique-type teams are hard to judge at first glance and lack extreme fights, but expert fans like them," stated Surziches. "Yeah, so Rias and Sererg's team should use their flashy fights to attract an audience while improving their strategies. That way in the future, the professional games will be heated up," followed up Azazel. "Either way, you need certain support to back up those powers. So will it be alright to send Roswies to Valhalla, Rias?" Azazel asks Rias. "Yes, if there are certain areas they want to improve, then there is no reason for me to decline it." Rias also agrees with it. Seeing that, Roswies gives her gratitude. "Thank you very much. Ah. I also have made the test paper for the mid-semester test, so please don't worry about it," she says. "As expected," stated Ice. He just tuned out the rest of the conversation. Flashback end. "Thanks for that, Saji," said Ice in response to Saji's congratulations. "Well, I think it's an appropriate recommendation. You went through lots of life and death situations, right? I participated in the battle against Loki and the battle at Kyoto, so I understand it. You will die at battles like that. Normally you would die. How many strong foes have you had as your opponents?" "They are all opponents who come from mythologies or recorded in history," Saji pointed out incredulously, causing Ice to laugh at his friend's plight. "You survived through those battles and achievements. So I would say it's an appropriate thing. Are you going to skip through ranks? Don't you guys already have the power of high-class devils already? Like you and Kiba, for example?" inquired Saji. "Apparently, in terms of promotion, we have to follow protocol and become middle-class devils first," pointed out Ice. So the higher-ups don't have the goodwill to do what's right, hey?" Kaichu said that you, Kiba and Akeno senpai have the power to become high-class devils by skipping through ranks. "Since it's Ekuryuite, holy demonic swords, and holy lightning," said Saji. Ice just nodded along, knowing he was right, but nothing else could be done about it, at least for now. I also want to get a promotion, but before that I need to get stronger. Saji says it with a bitter smile. You're strong enough already to be promoted. You do have the Dragon King Vritra with you after all. All you need now is some achievements that catch the attention of those stuck-up council members," informed Ice. Making Saji swell up a little at the praise before he became contemplative. "Maybe you're right, but it's not just me. I want to get stronger with the other Citri member as well. Lately, our Kaichu has been discussing it with Grigori. About the artificial sacred gear that is," said Saji, gaining Ice's interest. "Oh, artificial sacred gear, as you say," stated Ice with an interested expression. "Yeah. We, the Citri group, often participate in the experiments of Azazel-sensei. As a result, next time one of the non-sacred gear possessor of our group is going to be equipped with artificial sacred gear," said Saji. Ice just nodded his head. The Citri members, while talented in their own right, just didn't have anything that jumped out to people as a defining trait. With the exception of Saji and Tsubaki, they were all pretty average. "Ah, it's Haidu-kun," said a girl with pigtails. This was the Bishop Kusaka-san. "Congratulations for your promotion recommendation." She continues, followed by the other members also congratulate him. "Thank you all for your kind words," said Ice politely, causing the girls to blush at how different the aura around him seemed compared to his usual perverted antics. "Denshiro-senpai," Kaichu said to get that document. "The first-year girl, the pawn Nomura-san, says it to Saji." "Ah, that. Roger that, Nomura," replied Saji. "Gen-chan. I also have business, which is from Kaichu." The second-year girl, Bishop Hanakai-san, says it to Saji. "Are you serious, Hanakai? Looks like I have lots of things to do. First of all, let's do the ones which are easier to finish." "Haidu, I will be going then. Just relax by talking to others," says Saji as he leaves the room with Hanakai-san and Nomura-san. After saying that, apparently from what Ice was told by the Rookyura and Bishop Kusaka-san, the second-year girl, the Bishop Hanakai Momo, and the first-year girl, the pawn Nomura Aruko-san, are having an intense clash over Saji. Hanakai-san, Ice remembered, was the girl who was carrying the pack with his blood inside it during the raiding game against Citri group. Nomura-san is the one who got defeated by Kaneko during that same game. Hanakai-san was originally Yudo's fan. But apparently she is the type who can distinguish between dream and reality, and she realized that Kiba is someone who she cannot reach, so she had her heart taken by Saji, who continued to work hard. Nomura-san, on the other hand, has been beside Saji and has been supporting Saji with student council work and devil-related works. Because she's been right next to him, she apparently fell for Saji, who takes everything seriously. "Looks like you're also busy, Saji. I hope you can see their feeling for you," thought Ice with a wry smile. While he was thinking about his friend's love life while drinking green tea, the Rookyura came up to him with autograph paper. "Haidu, can I have your autograph?" she asked bluntly, causing Ice to sweat drop. This girl reminded him of Zenobia. "Okay, but are you sure you want mine?" he asked, just in case. "Of course." The battle against Bale. "I saw the recorded video and became deeply moved by it. That was the best fist fight ever," said Yura, who seems to be Ice's fan. According to Yura and the others in the room, there was a discussion about who the girls' types are amongst the devils attending the school of Ice, Yudo, Gapser and Saji. Yura told Ice that he was her type. She said she likes guys who seem to be covered in mud, causing Ice to sweat drop at this girl, although he thought that Yura sure is a bishoujo, even though she has really high popularity from girls for having a bishounen face. On a more disturbing note, the night Meguri-san prefers Gasper. She seems to like younger boys. "Young boys are good." Meguri-san says it naturally with a serious face, causing Ice to mentally tell his cute cowhide to run for the hills away from this crazy lady. "I definitely prefer Kiba Kaiun," said Kusaka-san, who is a big Yudo fan like always. Also, the Fuku Kaichu Tsubaki is also Yudo's fan. In terms of being a fan, Tsubaki is greater than Kusaka-san. Apparently she fell for Kiba after losing in the game at the underworld. I surmised that it's one of those love stories where the person finds out their feeling after they lost in the heat of battle. He thought to encounter not too long ago and smiled wryly as he could relate. "Kusaka-san, do you want me to introduce you to Yudo next time?" asked Ice politely, causing Kusaka-san to get overjoyed at his suggestion. "Really, but can you introduce Tsubaki-senpai first? She seriously is in love with Kiba Kaiun," she asked graciously, making Ice realize that the chastity of his fellow male peerage members are in serious danger from the crazies in this room. "So Haidu-kun is here, I see," said a familiar voice as Ice turned to see Sona Citri enter the room. "Yo Sona. I thought I'd drop by today," spoke Ice casually. Sona was taken aback for a moment as nobody was that casual with her, excluding her lunatic sister, not even Ria's. He even called her by her first name. She took a moment to compose herself before she spoke to her peerage. "There is a guest here, but I want everyone to do an errand for me. Tsubaki is having a hard time against the clubs," said Sona, getting affirmative replies from her peerage. See you later, Haidu-kun. They say before leaving the room, with Ice waving them all goodbye. As they left, Sona coolly made her way to her desk and started organizing paperwork. Ice just sat casually and continued drinking his green tea. There was a comfortable silence around them as Sona got to work. It was the first time they were alone with each other. Congratulations on your victory against Saraerg, as well as the mid-class devil recommendation, said Sona, causing Ice to smile handsomely at her, prompting a small blush on her part. Congratulations to you as well on your hard-fought win against Sakura Gares. It was truly a fascinating game to watch, complimented Ice, causing her blush to increase even further. She didn't know why the resident pervert suddenly had this effect on her. Thank you, she replied stoically. They continued to sit in comfortable silence for the rest of the time, with Sona occasionally sneaking glances at her guest and blushing all the while. Scene change. Currently find Ice in the large bathhouse in the basement of the Haidu residence. He was currently relaxing in the warm water, warm for him, blisteringly hot for regular non-draconian people, that the bath offered him. He contemplated his life since the incident at the clubhouse, and he feels that it turned out as well as it could. Even though it's been a rollercoaster of events, he feels as though he grew exponentially, not just in terms of power, but as a person as well. Even though the relationship with his fellow peerage members are at an impasse at the moment and he still feels a little hurt over what happened, he's decided to move on. There's no use moping about it, life's a emo bastard. Even though he may never have the same levels of trust in them that he once had, he can put aside his differences to work with them and help each other in the future. That's as far as he's willing to go though. He won't make the same mistake for the third time. During his contemplations he thought back to the encounter he had just before the raiding game and the unique individual he met. He couldn't help but feel a connection to this person, and his usual helpful nature was in full force on this occasion. Flashback. The training, to Ice's mind, was a roaring success. The time dilation field gave him an extra 6 months to train and pushed him to a whole new stratosphere of power and abilities, not just physically and magically but mentally as well. It was finally time for the big event, and he just completed the process of disabling the field. As soon as he dropped the field and took a whiff of the fresh clean air of the mountainside, his partner interrupted him. Boy, we've got company, said Drake. So you've finally decided to crawl out of whatever hole you were hiding in? Spoke a chillingly cold and monotonous voice. It was distinctly feminine and had the tones of someone with a well-educated and aristocratic upbringing. Of course, Ice was already aware of the intruder. As soon as he dropped the barrier, his Kenbun-shoku haki, as well as heightened senses, ensured that almost nothing escaped his immediate vicinity. It was the reason he was so laid back about the whole affair. He already got an estimation of power from the intruder and deduced that while she was powerful, more so than any of his teammates, he put her just a few notches below Grafia. She wasn't someone he couldn't handle. I'm not sure where you're from, Ajuo-chan, but intruding on someone else's property is a federal crime. Spoke Ice in a blasé tone of voice, demonstrating that he had no cares in the world right now. If the woman was affected by it, she didn't show it in her expression, which remained cold and impassive. I don't need to follow the rules of trash, that's beneath me. However, you need not worry about my mannerisms, for you will die here today, Sekirute, said the woman in an imperious tone of voice. Ice had to hold his laugh in as he was greatly enjoying this interaction. He didn't normally get to speak to his enemies in this way, as he was always shouting "Butchu this and Oppai that." Going through all those has lessons in disciplining oneself really paid off for him. He kind of felt like a baddest protagonist right now. He decided to go along with the banter and make it a little more dramatic. Oi Ajuo-chan, that's not a very nice thing to say. You may end up hurting my feelings, he said coolly as he turned around to face his would-be attacker in a dramatized fashion. All thoughts of drama went out the window with concussive force as he laid his eyes upon his attacker. Ice, in his life, would admit to seeing a multitude of beautiful women, from Ravel, Rainer, Riaz, Akeno, Sona to the more mature beauties like Kuroka, Grifia, Serafal and Venelana. But he could admit unashamedly that as his eyes met his attacker, he laid his eyes upon one of, if not the most beautiful creatures he has ever seen in his life. She was about 5 feet 9 inches, pretty tall for a woman, and had distinctly European features. Her glossy golden blonde hair was braided and tied into a neat bun at the back of her head, with her bangs falling to the left side of her face, covering her eye, leaving only the right on display. It was a beautiful forest green color that was accentuated by her milky white skin. She wore a black goth loli dress and a frilly white choker around her neck in an outfit reminiscent to a maid attire. Shiny black thigh-high boots encased her long slender legs, leaving her creamy thighs on display. In her hand she carried a pink umbrella, which went well with the outfit that, along with her cold expression, spoke of an untouchable beauty. Even with all the training and self-discipline, Ice was mesmerized by her otherworldly beauty. Her breasts were huge and were straining against her dress in an attempt to be free. It was probably the same size as Akeno's, if not a little bigger. She seemed so out of reach, yet at the same time something in her eyes was reaching out to him. Luckily this all happened in the span of a few seconds, and he didn't make an idiot out of himself by gawking. "It seems you already who I is miss and you have me at a disadvantage. My mother taught me to be polite, so let me introduce myself. My name is Issei, the current Secretary. Would you be so kind as to offer your name?" Asked Ice politely with flawless manners that were literally beaten into him by his tutors. The women raised an eyebrow, inwardly impressed at the display. All impretation about this man painted him a lecherous beast with no care for anything other than his desires. The information team seems to be slacking off. She also noticed that he did not introduce himself as a member of the Grimmery family, something she found somewhat strange. "My name is Hildegard," answered the woman, now known as Hildegard, impassively. Ice just sweat dropped at the unenthusiastic answer. "Okay, it's nice to meet you, Hildegard. Could you perhaps give me a reason as to why you seem to be set on killing me today?" Inquired Ice calmly, as if the topic had no relation to him whatsoever. "My masters have sent me here on a mission to eliminate you for the shame you have caused our faction. For this offense I will be your executioner," she said coldly towards him. Ice just looked at her for a few seconds before nodding his head. "From your energy signature I can tell you're a devil, a pretty powerful one at that. I'm going to assume that you're with the old Mag faction, given your mannerisms and tone of voice. Those guys were always about maintaining an apparent image of perceived strength, even though they have none of it. So they sent you here to eliminate me, to correct the injustice done to them, so to speak, even though I easily defeated you, leader Shalba Beelzebub. Long story short, this is a suicide mission, and you've been deemed surplus to requirement and were sent here to die," explained Ice clinically with a raised eyebrow at the woman, who flinched almost imperceptibly, but enough for him to notice and have his assumptions proven to be true. He internally sighed to himself, as this was not a battle that he liked fighting. This woman was a victim to her own circumstances and seemed to be going along with her mission, knowing it would bring her death. He could respect that about her. Hildegard suddenly felt a change in the air. A heavy pressure started to encompass her, and it became more stifling by the second. She focused on the source of it to see the Secretary being surrounded by a blood-red aura with tinges of black in it. It was extremely oppressive. It was like it was calling out to her to submit to him. She would never say this out loud to anyone, but she found power attractive, and seeing him releasing this much, coupled with his good looks, got her hot under the collar. She put it out of her mind though, as she had a mission to carry out. Even if it meant death. She smiled bitterly at that last thought. If this was going to be her final stand, at least she found a worthy opponent. She released the restraints on her power and was surrounded by a black aura as she drew her sword from her umbrella. Ice was impressed by the power this woman was giving off. It made Riaz and Akeno, combined, look like a complete joke. He could tell from her posture as well as the definition of her muscles and musculature that she trained herself well and didn't rely primarily on demonic power, even though she had the reserves to make such an allowance. She was a true warrior, evidenced by her willingness to stand against him, knowing that she would probably die. Even though he had a rating game to get to, he decided that this remarkable woman was more worthy of his attention and decided he would give her a battle she would remember. As the two opponents stared each other down, the area quietened as the leaves blew gently. Suddenly Hildegard disappeared from her spot with admirable speed. She reappeared in front of Ice and thrust her sword towards his chest, which he angled himself out of the way of before following up with a backhanded punch that she ducked under before trying to sweep his legs. He jumped over her effort and twisted his body in midair before bringing his heel down in an axe kick on the spot she previously occupied as she hastily moved out of the way. As she regained her bearings, she lifted her sword to the sky before gathering her demonic power and concentrating it at the tip in the form of a compressed black ball. She pulled her hand back before thrusting her sword at Ice's direction, making the ball bullet towards him. He couldn't avoid it in time as he was still landing from his jump, so he had no choice to take it. He reinforced his chest area with Yuzushoku Haki before taking the blast head-on. He winced a little, as even with the extra protection his Haki afforded, it still stung. He imagined that without Haki, that blast would have punched a hole right through him. His shirt was left in tatters after receiving the attack. He decided to pay her back by cocking his fist back, which was slowly being surrounded by fire before letting fly. Heiken. As Hildegard waited for the smoke to clear, she heard Ice's cry before seeing a fist of fire heading straight for her. Deciding to get out of dodge, she unfurled her wings and took to the sky. Ice, not wanting to hold back, surrounded his body with fire. Benkai. Before sending a huge column of it in her direction. Hibashira. Hildegard started sweating as she felt the heat of the flames, and she knew that she would be toasted. That hit her. She put up her best defensive arrays before trying to quell the flames with water she conjured up from her demonic power. It was a bit of a struggle between them before she heard the dreaded words that she completely forgot about. Boost transfer sounded out Ice's boosted gear as he boosted his now impressive reserves once before transferring it to the flames, giving it the edge to bypass her water and barriers. Hildegard tried her best to get out of the way, but took some damage on the left side of her body. Luckily she coated it with a thin film of demonic power to mitigate the damage, but her clothes didn't escape unscathed and her left boot was almost completely destroyed, leaving her leg and foot bare, and the left side of her dress was burnt, giving Ice a glimpse of her lacy green bra, which he found very appealing. As she gasped heavily in attempts to regain her breath, she thought over the information she received on the target and realized that it was completely outdated as the boy described to her and the man that stood before her were two completely different people. She was honestly starting to enjoy this fight. Hildegard, after regaining her bearings, fired large bolts of elemental magic at Ice, ranging from ice, fire and lightning. They were all widespread and powerful, and Ice took the time to admire them. It was reminiscent of Roswies to him. As he reinforced his body with hockey, he dove into the stream of attacks, either batting them away or taking them head-on. They hurt quite a bit, but he knew with his sturdy body coupled with his regeneration, he would be back to normal in no time. As he neared his opponent, he faked out before delivering a harsh punch to the gut that made her spit a little blood before grabbing her by the shoulder and judo flipping her to the ground. He then turned intent on dropping an elbow to her, but she quickly rolled out of the way before swiping at him with her sword, leaving a thin cut on his right forearm. The two continued to trade blows together in a similar manner. It was a physical form of magical combat with them throwing magical attacks, then trying to exploit the openings with physical blows. As the fight went on, large smiles bloomed on the faces of both opponents. Ice because he was fighting a beautiful and strong woman, and Hildegard because she felt so free to express herself against this man. He seemed to be bringing out all these strange feelings that she thought she bottled up by his mere presence and attitude. He didn't look at her with contempt or disgust, merely understanding and kindness. It made her want to reach out to him more. To see more of him. To bathe in his presence for longer before she clamped down on that part when she remembered her mission. As the fight was drawing to an end, Hildegard was barely keeping up. The difference in stamina and conditioning was starting to shine through. Ice's regeneration factor healed his wounds and therefore made him seem almost fresh. Hildegard's stamina was waning, as well as her motivation for killing Ice, as she started to enjoy the fight and didn't have the conviction to kill him any longer. So as Ice's punch came toward her, she discreetly dropped her guard, being tired of carrying on this charade, and took the full force of it head-on. What she didn't know was that Ice saw her action and held back a lot of power from the hit. Nevertheless, she was left sprawled on the ground in pain, seemingly resigned to her fate. After a few minutes passed, she inquired to Ice, "Aren't you going to finish me off?" Although her voice was still impassive, there was a hint of resignation in it that Ice picked up. "Do you know what I felt when we traded blows? Emptiness. That's what I feel from you, Miss Hildegard. Like you are just going through the motions with no true purpose in life. You came here with the intention to die, did you not? Even though your mission was supposedly to kill me, not once did I feel the intent to kill from you," pointed out Ice, making the woman turn away in shame. She didn't like being called out on such things. She hated being reminded of her situation in life. "I don't appreciate you using me for assisted suicide, nevertheless I can tell there's more about you hiding beneath the surface. I can see it in your eyes just waiting to break free. So I want you to tell me about yourself and your life." Motioned Ice, making her look at him incredulously. She had no intentions of sharing her life with a stranger, even if he was a kind-hearted one, but as the minutes went by with him staring straight into her eyes, the silent pressure became unbearable to her and she blurted out her thoughts. "I was born in the underworld to a family of extra demons in the service of the Beelzebub line, similar to the Lucifuge family to the Lucifer line. My mother and father were extremely zealous in their support for the supremacy of the devils and absolute power of the Mau, as is my older sister. I never cared much for those things as I focused more on getting stronger. My sister was always jealous of my talent, as were the others in the faction, seeing it as me trying to rise above my station. I was taught from a young age to obey my masters and carry out my duties with pride, but as the years went by, it all seemed so hollow and meaningless. What was the point of serving these masters who sit in their homes all day and complain about their lives while living in luxury? Is this all my life was meant to be? These were the thoughts that made me an outcast in the faction and saw me being sent on this suicide mission. They didn't expect me to kill you, but even if I did, I would be killed the moment I return. So as you can see, I have nothing left to live for, so please kill me," pleaded Hildegard with misty eyes, barely managing to hold back her tears at the thought of her hollow life. She wanted to at least die with dignity at the hands of this man. Ice's heart broke a little at seeing such a powerful and beautiful woman break down like this. He felt an odd stirring in his heart as he gazed at her. He wouldn't let those old Mau faction bastards snuff out such a dazzling light. Is that it? Are you going to resign yourself to death without accomplishing anything in life? I can see it in your eyes. The burning hunger to prove yourself. To make a mark on the world. The desire to be free. I know because I see the same things when I look in the mirror every morning," spoke Ice as he had a desperate need to save this woman from herself. She just looked him in surprise before digesting his words carefully. I know it's hard. To break away. To make your own path. It's scary to go against what you've been doing your whole life. But you have to. I can see the potential you have for doing great things. Look at me. People called me the weakest Sekiryuite in history. 6 months ago I was a weak human. Now I defeated a god. Don't ever let the circumstances of your birth dictate the kind of person you want to be. Have the strength to rise above it and carve out a destiny of your own choosing. Spoke Ice, kindly with a smile on his face directed at Hildegard, who was enraptured as she listened to him. His words struck a deep chord within her, and she could tell they carried a similar weight with him. They were similar in that regard. Trying to break free from their circumstances. Don't be afraid. I can see that you're a woman filled with love. You need to find a person who is worthy of it. Who is worthy of your loyalty and devotion, unlike the scum you currently serve. I'm sure you can find a new master to serve who is deserving of that and will make you soar in the sky and shine brightly like I know you deserve to be. So don't cheaply throw your life away. Live your life on your own terms. Get out there and find the one you can dedicate yourself to wholeheartedly. Finished Ice with a dazzling smile that took her breath away. She could feel a blush creep onto her cheeks and her heart rate elevate from his sweet and kind words. Everything he said resonated with her on a deep and subconscious level. He unknowingly bypassed all of her barriers and struck her right where it mattered most. As Ice turned around to look in his bag for a change of clothes to replace his damaged ones, the eyes of the she-devil followed him with adoration. His oblivious charm and charisma unknowingly ensnared another girl in its grasp. Hildegard decided then and there that she had finally found the one she had been looking for. The sheer determination and conviction in his voice coupled with his power and his kindness made him the master of her dreams. She decided that this will be the man that she will dedicate herself to wholeheartedly. From now on she can stand tall. She could feel the metaphoric chains release her from their grasp to allow her to go toward her new destiny. From now onward she would hold strong in her beliefs. She needs to be strong to stand beside her new master, even if he doesn't realize it. She decided from this day forth he will be the only man that she would grovel to. Her love, her loyalty, her undying devotion from this day forth will belong to Issei. What are you going to do now? Questioned Ice. Or as Hildegard called him in her mind, Isama. She needed to play this right. She didn't want to scare him off too quickly. She would feel bad about it, but she needed to take advantage of his kindness. I have nowhere to go now. You stole my purpose. I expect you to take responsibility. She stated impassively with a barely noticeable blush. Ice's eyes boggled at that ridiculous statement. What? That's crazy. You were trying to kill me, lady. I didn't have a choice. Protested Ice. So you are saying that I should go back to them and die because I have nowhere else to go to? Pointed out Hildegard with a raised eyebrow. Ice just massaged his forehead in attempt to alleviate the impending headache. While he did tell her to life how she wanted, he didn't expect him to bite him in the ass like this. As it is, he was already late for the raiding game. He couldn't take her home as he didn't really have the political sway to keep her from being imprisoned. Luckily, some of the older senpais from the boosted gear previously told him about hideouts that they had that were covered with security seals and barriers where they hoarded their treasure, like true dragons. Unfortunately, I can't take you with me as you would be thrown into prison immediately. Here is the address and password of a location where you will be safe. I will call you daily and come check up on you from time to time to bring food and other necessities, as well as anything you'd like to request. Is that agreeable with you? Asked Ice. Hi Isama. Replied Hildegard. She kept a stoic facade on the outside, but on the inside she was jumping for joy at the development. She now had the opportunity to interact and serve her new master, even if he didn't realize that was what she would be doing. She felt a feeling of complete bliss and happiness at the prospect of serving him. You don't have to call me that, you know. Just Ice is fine. Said Ice. Hi Isama. Replied Hildegard once more. Ice just sweat dropped as he looked at her, realizing he was not going to win this battle. Very well. Hildegard is a bit of a mouthful. Do you mind if I call you Hilda? Questioned Ice innocently. Hildegard, meanwhile, was squealing inwardly at being given a pet name by her master. She kept a stoic facade though, with only a tiny dusting of pink on her cheeks. Ice just smiled at her, causing her eyes to twinkle in happiness. Flashback end. Ice just shook his head in fond exasperation as H thought about the devil maid. She had slowly crept into his heart in barely a day, and he quite enjoyed her company. He should probably give her a call to check if she needs anything and to hear her beautiful voice. Just as he was about to make the call, a communication circle opened up in front of him. Yo Ice. Said the voice. Azazel-sensei. What's up? Questioned Ice to the now identified Azazel. We just had a little meeting here in the conference room about an event happening tomorrow. Where were you? Asked Azazel. Sorry, I'm in the bathhouse in the basement. I must have lost track of time. So what's the deal? he asked. Tomorrow I'm having a special guest coming over. Someone who can change the tide of the upcoming war. I want you to keep an open mind when you meet this person and try your best to answer their question. Can you do that for me? Questioned Azazel seriously. I sat up a little straighter at hearing the serious tone. Of course, Sensei. I trust you with my life. If you say this can help, then I'll do my best to aid you in making it happen. Answered I sincerely. He considered Azazel something akin to a father figure and would help him in any way that he can. As they exchanged pleasantries before ending the call, Ice lay back in the bath wondering what tomorrow might bring. It was a pleasant Tuesday morning that the residents of the Haidu residence awoke to. Mr. and Mrs. Haidu were currently away on a vacation provided by their son Ice as an anniversary present, so currently the 6-story house is occupied solely by Ice and the girls of the orc, minus Roswi S. We find said girls making their way down to the kitchen in search of the pleasant aroma permeating throughout the house. The girls were surprised to find the object of their affections, one Haidu Issei, reclining on a leather couch to the side of the dining table, reading what looks like a black leather book. He was currently wearing his, now regular, black leather attire. That wasn't what shocked them though, it was the delicious-looking Western breakfast spread over the table that consisted of eggs, bacon, sausages, toast, salad, and muffins, along with a pot of coffee, as well as a pitcher of juice. It was also the source of the enchanting scent that awakened them. The girls were still a little skittish around Ice. They still felt the lingering guilt over the way they treated him and the thoughtless way they disregarded his feelings and were desperate to make amends. Over the last few days they had tried interacting with him the way they had in the past to realize that it wouldn't cut it anymore. When they tried to apologize, he just told them that he accepts it and that it's water under the bridge now. However, there is still a sense of detachment that can be felt when he interacts with them. While he isn't rude or ill-mannered, there is a sense of indifference that can be sensed from him when compared to how excitable he used to be. It was quite disheartening to them. If anything, they would have preferred if he got angry and shouted at them. This new approach though made it seem as if he was keeping them at a respectably polite distance, along with his now formal manner in dealing with them hurt them deeply. They yearned for the old Ice who would get a huge nosebleed at the sight of their breasts and act goofy all the time. This new Ice didn't really give them the time of day, as evidenced by their previous attempts at flirting with him while exposing their bodies. He would just look at them and raise an eyebrow until they became embarrassed, feeling they were making fools of themselves. "Ah no, good morning, Ice-san," greeted Asia timidly. She was probably the one most affected as Ice usually gave her a lot of preferential treatment and spoiled her a lot. But now he treated her the same as everyone else, which was the biggest piece of evidence to his new attitude. Asia was quite distraught at that. "Mo, good morning," responded Ice politely, momentarily looking up from his book at the skimpily dressed residents who were still in their sleep clothes before going back to reading without sparing them another glace, making them feel highly insecure. Riaz cleared her throat before asking, "Did you perhaps prepare us this breakfast, Ice?" "Well, due to my schedule I was up early. After doing my morning training I decided to make myself breakfast. Seeing as though Mom isn't here, I thought I would make this morning's breakfast, seeing as though we won't be going to school today on account of the meeting Azazel-sensei arranged," replied Ice without ever looking up from whatever it was he was reading, causing an aura of gloom to appear around her. She looked up to the sounds of eating to see that Zenobia, Irina and Kaneko were already tearing through the food at an alarming rate. Zenobia and Irina, having comical tears rolling down their eyes, saying how delicious it was. Deciding to get some food before it disappears into the stomachs of the ravenous girls, the rest of them took their seats at the table. After a few minutes they were all impressed at the food. "Ari if Yufu, I didn't know Ice-kun could cook," stated Akeno playfully. She was disappointed that she didn't get the usual blushing reaction out of him. "Between the months I spent on the mountains with Tannen along with my 2-month seclusion, cooking was a skill I had no choice to pick up if I wanted to survive," replied Ice, once again seeming disinterested. "I must say this is very delicious, Ice-sama. I'm very impressed," stated Ravel bashfully with a blush adorning her face as she glanced at Ice. "Yufufu, I'm glad my standards are up to the Oju-sama of the Phoenix clan and the undisputed queen of baking," teased Ice with a sly smile on his face and a mischievous twinkle in his eyes, finally looking up from his book and displaying an emotion that wasn't boredom or disinterest, causing Ravel's face to break out in an atomic blush. The other girls at the table though were irked at the display. They could clearly see that Ice favored Ravel over them if the flirtatious and playful way they interacted were anything to go by. Nothing else was said apart from the idle chatter made by the girls over the table. Scene change. A few hours have passed since then, and we find the group now situated in the living room, with Rai and Akeno sitting at the table discussing something. Irina and Zenobia are playing video games while sitting on the floor, while Asia, Ravel and Kaneko are sitting on the large couch behind the meeting suites. Asper and Yudo came over and are currently sitting in a box in the corner of the room and speaking to Ice about the upcoming promotional exams respectively. They normally would be stressing about the upcoming exam, but decided to take it easy for today, seeing as though Azazel has something important to discuss. Read. Procrastinating. As midday came around, the sound of the doorbell rang out. Ice, being the one currently responsible for the house in his parents' absence, got up to answer it. As he swung the door open, he came face to face with a skinny young girl dressed in Gothic Lolita dress. "It has been a while, Dreg," says the young girl while remaining expressionless. Ice, on the outside, remained extremely calm and just raised a single eyebrow at the guest, while inwardly he was freaking the fuck out. "Azazel, you motherfucking bastard. What the fuck were you thinking? You could have at least told me. I'm definitely gonna kick you in the balls if I survive this," thought Ice hysterically. He didn't really have a problem with the Ouroboros dragon, but when the most powerful being in the world shows up on your doorstep, and she also happens to be the leader of a group of terrorists hell-bent on destroying the world, you have the right to have a mini freak-out session. He regained his inward composure quick enough though, and looked to the side and spotted a sheepish-looking Azazel rubbing the back of his head while giving him a nervous smile. "For some reason I have the overwhelming urge to get into balance breaker, boost myself about 20 times, and then kick you in the balls as hard as I can. I wonder why that is?" asked Ice with an unnervingly calm smile on his face that made the governor break out into a comical amount of sweat. Hey now Ice, no need to get violent. I ask you to hear me out on this one, remember?" placated Azazel nervously. Ice just sighed exasperatedly, wondering if this was how Shemhaza felt when dealing with this overgrown man-child and his antics. "Well, come on, in office, is it just her or is the volley team dropping by as well?" questioned Ice sarcastically, not really expecting an answer, which is why his eyebrow started twitching irritably when a light was formed in the entrance and a small magic circle appeared. From said magic circle appeared a young blonde girl dressed in a typical witch's attire with a cape and pointy hat, accompanied by a large dog with as gray fur. This young girl is known as Lafay, whom Ice previously met at Kyoto when fighting the hero faction when she appeared with the ancient weapon Gogmagog. The ash-colored dog, though Ice could remember this chilling feeling very well, seeing as though he was impaled by its claws and was on the verge of death not too long ago because of it. It was a lot smaller, but there was no mistaking the god-killing wolf Fenrir. "How are you doing, Haidu Issei-sama? It is I, Lafay Pendragon. I have been under your care at Kyoto. This over here is Fenrir-chan," was the polite and gentle introduction offered by Lafay. But more importantly, did the cute magician girl just call one of the most dangerous being in existence, one that can easily kill gods, with a chan suffix. Ice just sweat dropped at that. The amount of weirdos around him is exponentially increasing. It also seems that the mighty Fenrir is quite attached to her and isn't giving off any hostility like before. While Ice was pondering this, a glamorous woman appeared from another magic circle and hugged him, making Ice twitch a little at the overwhelmingly soft sensations of her enormous breasts. "Long time no see, Seker Yuite-chin. Do you still like Oppai like always?" questioned the now identified Kuroka. The mischievous Nekomata from Volley's team, as well as Kaneko's older sister, had a habit of teasing Ice, and it seems she planned to continue the tradition. Luckily for Ice, he was in a lot more control of himself, as he gave no outward reaction other than a sigh. Inwardly though, he was doing a goofy dance at feeling the amazingly soft and bouncy Oppai of the gorgeous Kuroka. Drake, on the other hand, felt like crying. Even though his partner became such a badass, underneath it all he was still a shameless pervert. That thought alone brought more wails and sobs from the dragon, which Ice willfully ignored. "Lafay, it's nice to see you again and under better circumstances. Kuroka, please don't do anything stupid in my parents' house. I expect you to behave yourself," stated Ice with a deadpan stare at Kuroka, who could only pout cutely in response, making Ice resist the urge to glump her. "Is it just you two or are the others on their way as well?" he questioned. "It's just us," Naya replied Kuroka as she nuzzled him. He couldn't really enjoy it as the most powerful being in the world was looking directly at him. "We need to talk," she said. Ice looked to Azazel for confirmation. "Drink tea with her. I deceived and lied to other factions in order to make this setting. If this was found and goes into a bad direction, my head will get cut off for real," persuaded Azazel. Ice, on the other hand, just sighed before inviting them all in. As they got to the living room, the other occupants, predictably, were extremely alarmed and immediately took up fighting positions. Azazel immediately got between them. Hey. I told you yesterday. Not to hold killing intent no matter who comes. So no attacking. She also won't attack you. Even if she did, we can't defeat her even if we fight together." Briaz gets enraged at Azazel's words. "This is absurd, Azazel. That dragon is the boss of the terrorist group who has been attacking each of the factions. She is a bitter enemy who has also caused significant damage to the world of devils, so why did you bring such an enemy to this place? This town, which is the important location for the Alliance. And especially this house. Doesn't allowing office into this town mean that you deceived those who secure this town? This is breaking the Alliance. So why did you do something like this? Snapped Riaz, with the others nodding their heads in agreement. Ice can literally feel a headache approaching. He looked to Lefay, who looked a little concerned at the happenings, while Kuroka was highly amused. Okay, that's enough, said Ice authoritatively, along with sending out a small wave of Hashoku haki, making the occupants of the room, minus Azazel, who was impressed, and Office, who continued to remain stoic, shiver in fear at the feeling of pure power and dominance that swept through the room. Of course there were some who were highly aroused by it, Akeno and Kuroka. Nevertheless, Ice achieved his objective of quelling any arguments and asserting his control over the room. Azazel-sensei put his neck on the line here for some reason or the other to bring her here. If you remember correctly, he was the one who was the most vocal in terms of establishing peace between the factions. Bringing Office here, regardless of her current position, must serve some purpose. I for one fully trust him, as he has never led us wrong before. So you can both throw a tantrum about it and leave, or we can all sit down and discuss this like civilized people. Instructed Ice sternly while looking around the room, seeing the occupants too embarrassed to meet his gaze. Kuroka smiled seductively at seeing him assert his power, while Lefay just looked up at him with starry eyes at how cool he was. Azazel just looked extremely touched at the trust Ice placed in him and grateful at the direction he took the meeting. Yeah. I'm sorry, Riaz. I have deceived and am still deceiving many people in order for her to come and visit here. But maybe her wish would be something that might change the existence of Chaos Brigade itself. I determined that it was necessary to stop unnecessary blood from being shed. I will apologize to you guys again and will ask you guys again. I'm sorry, and I ask you, can you at least listen to her story? Azazel asks as he bows his head down. This man who has high pride is doing this. It must have magnificent meaning behind this. Like I said, I trust you fully, sensei, stated Ice with a small smirk in his direction. The other group members also looked at each other and put their weapons away. I'm always in the care of sensei. I want to slash my sword at Office this instant, but I will endure it, said Zenobia as she folded her arms and closed her eyes. To allow Office, and while not informing Michael-sama personally, I don't know what I should do, but there is no other choice but to believe in Ice-kun and Azazel-sensei. Irina also affirmed it while having complicated feelings. From where she stands, she should be the one with the most difficulty, since she is the representative of the Heavenside staff, but she still affirmed it. It's proof that she believes in Ice and Azazel. I just have to believe in Ice-san, and like I did from the start, stated Asia. I have the same thought as her as well, said Ravel, who was also fine with it. As long as Isama didn't mind, neither did she. She trusted his judgment. Riaz just sighed at this and acquiesced to the meeting. Scene change. A strange mixture of members are currently gathered in the VIP room of the Haidu residence. The Gremory peerage, Irina, Ravel, Azazel, Lefay, Fenrir, Kuroka and Office, who is the center of this meeting. A gathering of those who would be normally something impossible. Here is your tea. Akeno gave green tea to the volley team members and Office while being on alert. Lefay drinks green tea, while Kuroka is eating snacks which go well with tea. Fenrir is sleeping near Lefay. It seems as though they don't have any feelings of being nervous. The rest of the members just sat around the room with awkward expressions on their faces at the uncomfortable silence, as well as being in the presence of a being that could erase your existence with a blink of an eye. Ice looked over at Azazel, who was urging him to do or say something to Office, who was staring at him unblinkingly. He just sighed again, something he's been doing a lot of lately. So Azazel says you have some business with me. Is there something I can help you with? Asks Ice politely. Even though she was the boss of the terrorists, she was also ridiculously cute, so Ice couldn't help but smile at her. Greg, do you want to quit being a heavenly dragon? Inquired the Ouroboros dragon, causing Ice to blink in confusion. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. Could you elaborate? Urged Ice. The human who is the host. He's been having a different sense of growth up until now. I think this is very strange. Very different from previous heavenly dragons. Volley is also the same. Strange. Very strange. Stated Office blankly. The fight against Cao Cao. The fight against Bale. Drake had different evolutions. Armor changed shape completely. It's the first time. First time that I know of. Continued Office with a tilt of her head that Ice thought made her look adorable. That's why I want to ask. Drake. What will you become? Asks Office with a cute twitch of her neck. Suddenly both of Ice's arms are covered in a red aura and his gauntlets appeared. For many it was the first time seeing his subspecies sacred gear up close, and they were all impressed by it. A voice boomed out of the gauntlets. I don't know, Office. I don't know what this guy wants to become. I don't know, but it's certain that he's having an interesting growth, answered Drake. Ice decided to sit this one out for the moment and let the two legendary dragons converse. Two heavenly dragons mixed, I, as the infinite and great, read as the dream into the chant. Drake, why did you think in becoming the king of domination? Questioned Office. It must be the result of seeking strength. Because of that I was eliminated. I couldn't become strong besides increasing the power of domination. I never thought that my armor could change so drastically," answered Dreg. "I don't understand domination. Those from Cow's brigade seek domination. I don't understand. Great Red isn't domination. I also am not domination," stated Office. "There is no way for a being that has been strong from the beginning to understand the reasons for domination. You who were born from the nothingness of infinite and Great Red who was born from illusions from dream must have been from a different dimension. Office, you appeared in this world getting out from the dimensional gap. What have you attained from this world and why did you think of returning to your homeland?" inquired Dreg. "I also want to question. Dreg. Why do you try to become a different being? Will you discard domination? What is ahead after that?" Office countered. Ice was highly amused at his partner's question being questioned. He is definitely going to tease Dreg about this later. Very interesting indeed. A conversation between a heavenly dragon and a dragon god is something you don't see often, stated Azazel with his eyes sparkling excitedly. He seems like the kind of guy to like these things. Ice just looked at him with an amused glance. "Dreg, will you become the Chichiryute? Can you surpass a heavenly dragon by groping tits? Dreg, would you become a dragon that represents tits?" questioned Office expressionlessly. Unfortunately that was a critical hit for Dreg. Dreg who heard that starts hyperventilating. Even this guy ends up saying that ooh. Haha. My consciousness got cut. "Counselor. Someone call the counselor," cried Dreg hysterically. It seems he received too much damage mentally from the Ouroboros dragon. "Calm down Dreg. It's okay, just take it easy. Here, I'll help you out," said Ice as his hand began to glow in a faint green light. Well, he wasn't the best at healing magic, he did know a spell that used magic to reinforce positive emotions in someone and help them calm down. He learned this spell specifically for Dreg. Sorry, this spell sure works. Thanks partner, said Dreg, who calmed down sufficiently. "Don't worry about it Dreg. I should be the one apologizing. You just take it easy for now. I'll take over from here," reassured Ice. Dreg really was becoming a sensitive dragon. "I want to look. Dreg. I want to look at this possessor even more," states Office blankly. Even though she seems emotionless, her eyes now have the color of interest and it was directed straight at Ice, who just sweat dropped at having garnered the attention of the most powerful being in the world. "Fuck you dragon aura," cursed Ice in his head while maintaining an outwardly polite demeanor. "So like that, can you leave her in this house for a few days? Just as you see, Office wants to look at you. I don't know what reason there is behind this, but it will be fine if it's just looking right," said the bastard governor cheerfully. Ice really wanted to strangle him sometimes. Riaz on the other hand didn't react favorably to this development. "Hold on just a minute. Having us meet with her is one thing, but having her live here is crossing the line. I won't allow that," started Riaz before she got cut off halfway into her rant. "Be silent Riaz," uttered Ice with a dangerous tone, unconsciously releasing his Hashoku Haki right at her, causing her to go stiff with fear. The entire atmosphere of the room changed in an instant. Ice's power permeated the room, making everyone on high alert. They had never seen this side of him before, at least not directed at them. All in all, it was completely fucking terrifying. Riaz was happy that he finally said her name, but the context was not something she could be glad about. The others, LeFay and a now serious Kuroka included, unconsciously took up battle stances. "Regardless of how you feel, this is my parents' house and therefore with them being away, leave me in charge of it. I will allow Office to stay, provided of course that she agrees to my condition. I don't care if she's the strongest being in the world, if she doesn't agree to what I want she can leave right now," ordered Ice fearlessly. The others looked at him as though he had lost his mind, Azazel included, which is saying a lot, as that guy's basically is a few fries short of a happy meal. While Ravel and LeFay just stared at him in admiration. Office just stared back impassively at Ice, who looked at her unflinchingly. The tension in the room made everyone feel as though a knife was pressed up against their throats. After a while Office just nodded, showing that she will agree. "Very well. You can stay here for as long as you want, as long as you," started with the most serious face that anyone has ever seen on him before. They all unconsciously gulped and leaned forward, wondering what he would ask. "Call me Ani-sama," finished Ice jubilantly, causing the occupant of the room to face vault before getting up and looking at him incredulously. The sheer ridiculousness of the request made them wonder if Serriard punched a few screws loose in his head. Ice on the other hand just had a satisfied smile on his face, like everything was completely normal. Office just stared expressionlessly at him for about 5 minutes, making everyone wonder if she was going to vaporize him. They all took a step back. "Ani-sama," responded Office blankly with a cute tilt of her head. The jaws of all the occupant in the hit the floor at seeing the oldest and most powerful being in the world calling someone Ani-sama. The absurdity of it all blew their minds. Ice though had a completely different reaction. "Away. He squealed while picking Office up and nuzzling his cheek against hers, with a blissful expression on his face, while hers remained completely blank. He then took a seat and pulled Office onto his lap where she fit snugly before handing her a bar of chocolate that he unwrapped for her. "Yufufu, here you go, Office-chan. Ani-sama got you some delicious chocolate for you," stated Ice with a giddy smile. Office just stared at the offering before taking it in her hands and cutely nibbling on it, making nom-nom sounds. Ice inwardly squealed at how cute she looked, causing Drake to deadpan at how absurd his partner was. He went from terrifying baddest to squealing sis-con in 5 seconds flat. Ice though didn't care as he petted Office on the head, causing her ears to twitch cutely, showing that she enjoyed the treatment. The others watched on in disbelief at this development. Seeing the mighty infinite dragon god being treated like a house was too much for their minds to handle. Azazel on the other hand just laughed uproariously. In his mind only Ice could get the Ouroboros dragon to behave like a tame house cat. Now that everything is sorted out, I'm assuming both LaFay and Kuroka are going to be staying as well. I don't have a problem with that, but I would ask that you behave yourself as there are exams coming up as well as a promotional test, so the residents of this house will be studying. I expect you to be smart enough to know to stay out of sight and not draw any attention to us," instructed Ice sternly. "Understood. I will just relax, Nyan." Office and Kuroka agreed to Ice's order. LaFay on the other hand walked towards Ice while pushing something out to him. He realized it was an autograph paper. She asks cutely while twitching her body. "You The battle against Bale the other day. I was deeply moved. Please give me your signature if it isn't too much," requested LaFay with sparkly eyes as she gazed at Ice, who just smiled softly at her, remembering that she was a big fan of his. Ice just chuckled before taking the offered paper and decided to give her a really cool one. He drew a few cool designs along with signing it to his #1 fan and cutest witch he knew, which made LaFay smile blissfully as she hugged the autograph to her budding chest. The rest of the day went on as usual, with Ice doting on Office by giving her sweets and introducing her to games, while the others kept a healthy distance, but also a wary eye on the Ouroboros dragon in case she decides to do something. Scene change. A week passed by without much fuss as the residents of the Haidu residence spent their time studying for the upcoming exams, with Akeno and Yudo, who would come over after school, studying for the upcoming promotional test. Ice on the other hand took another week off school after handing in an advanced assignment to show that he was caught up with the work and was well advanced. The others were shocked by this as they knew Ice wasn't the brightest bulb in the box. But after his training, his tutors drilled in their knowledge of maths, science and the world in general into his head to make sure he knew what he needed to know. And while Ice was a shameless pervert, he wasn't an idiot. Just unmotivated. He spent the rest of his week off playing with Office, LaFay and Kuroka. From splashing about in the underground pool, playing video games and watching movies to introducing Office to the wonderful world of Pokémon, which she became quite interested in if the way she constantly played with his Nintendo 3DS was anything to go by. He thought it was adorable when she tried to catch Pokémon, but failed only to pout cutely while still being expressionless. It was amusing to him to see her expressing some emotions, no matter how minuscule. He also discovered that she had quite the sweet tooth. From chocolates, donuts, cookies, cakes and other assorted sweets, she munched them with fervor. Ice didn't mind buying her as much as she wanted as he had enough money to spare anyway. There were a few occasions where he would disappear from time to time, confusing the rest as he never offered an explanation as to his whereabouts. This was one of those times that he went missing. Scene change. Ice, using a transportation spell, vanished before reappearing in a moderately lavish 3-story home in the middle of nowhere. It was one of the homes of the previous boosted gear possessors that was heavily reinforced and hidden away by magic. It was heavily guarded by barriers and spells, making it almost inaccessible unless one knew the password. Ice, after spending so much time with his senpais, discovered that like most dragons, they were hoarders. From weapons to treasures to land. They collected them and hid them away from the world. It was why his current bank accounts were so massive and why he could afford to pay for the entire Op-I Dragon fan area in the last trading game. As soon as he fully materialized in the house, he was immediately greeted by the only guest, the one who previously tried to assassinate him, Hildegard. She was dressed in her usual goth lowly maid costume as she bowed down lowly to him upon arrival. "Welcome back, master," was her simple greeting. Ice just sweat dropped. Her attitude did a complete 180 concerning him. She went from hostile to completely subservient. To be honest, it really freaked him out, but he could tell she wasn't a bad person, so he never made an issue with her. As long as she was happy and had the freedom to choose, something that was denied from her entire life, he was content. He told her during their fight that she should find a master worthy of her to serve. She took this to heart. What Ice hasn't realized yet was that the master she chose was him. His words and actions struck a deep chord within her and made her feel for the first time in her life. Emotions were something that were beaten out of her at a young age, as she was taught that a servant had no need for them. So when the kindness and the passion of the Sekiruyute brought about these long-buried emotions within her, she needed to know more. She held no loyalty to her former masters, as they were weak scum as far as she was concerned. Issei, on the other hand, was someone who followed his own beliefs. He never picked on the weak or innocent, he displayed kindness even to his enemies, but had the overwhelming power to crush those who stood in his way. His actions and words during that raiding game, as well as the last week that she spent getting to know him, reinforced her opinion that this man was the one she was waiting for. "Hilda, I told you that you don't have to refer to me in that way. You're a guest here, so just call me Ice," he said exasperatedly. It was a point that was argued a lot between them, with Hilda refusing to budge. Suddenly Hilda got to her knees and prostrated herself at his feet, shocking Ice at the deeply submissive gesture. "I, Hildegard Irby, pledge my loyalty and devotion to serving your cause. I will be your shield and your sword against those who wish to harm you. Please accept this oath of mine and allow me to dutifully serve you, my master," intoned Hilda with a passion Ice hadn't seen from her before. He was shocked to the core that the strong-willed and sharp-tongued Hildegard would submit to him in such a manner. He needed some answers. "Hilda, why?" he asked carefully. Hilda just tilted her head up a little while still remaining in her submissive position. She had a rare smile on her face, and Ice thought she looked mesmerizing. The beauty of a woman truly happy and at peace with herself is not one to be underestimated. "You told me to set myself free from the shackles that bound me and find someone worthy of my loyalty and my devotion. I made up my mind a week ago, but spending time with you only showed me that I was right in my decision. You are the one I choose, as there can be no other that I will obey but you. You opened my eyes to my flaws and my SELF0 imprisonment, so I expect you to take responsibility," replied Hilda with a beautiful smile. Ice, on the other hand, just face-palmed. He really needed to watch what he says. He never knew when it would come back to bite him in the ass. "You sly minx. Well played. Very well. I do Issei, accept this pledge. Serve me loyally from this day forth, Hildegard, and I promise never to abuse the trust and the faith you have put in me," stated Ice with a kind smile. Hilda, on the other hand, just had tears in her eyes at finally having a purpose in her life. A person she can dedicate herself to. There was no greater happiness to her. "Yes, master," she replied shakily. Ice just smiled as he helped her off the floor and to the couch as he unpacked the groceries, clothes and other necessities that were needed for her everyday living. He spoke to her of the happenings in the past week, from his promotional exam to office. Needless to say, she was shocked till a feeling of pride swelled in her chest at the thought of her master taming the infinite dragon god. They carried on chatting away through the night, telling each other their life stories, building a deeper bond with each other that would shake the world in the years to come. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support the LIONHEART021 the Snow Wolf for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. See you in the next video. Goodbye.